Welcome everyone to Honkai Star Rail's version 1.4. If you thought they were done torturing our wallets, then you, my friend, clearly have not played enough anime gacha games because the ride is only getting started. Entering first in line for this update is 2B, or should I say Jingliu, yet another hotly anticipated character in no small part due to the beautifully animated video featuring her and her protege Jingliu. Versions 1.0 and 1.3 have done a bang-up job giving players ample cast members to fill out their rosters. We have Lo Chao for healing, Fushuan for tanking, Silver Wolf for debuffing, and Super Danhong, Blade, Kafka, Sila, and Jingyuan for DPS. Where I'm going with this is that all damage dealers from here on out are going to have to do a lot more than just deal damage. They either have to fulfill a niche that has yet to be occupied, and more importantly that is necessitated by the game, or they'll have to be close to, if not exceed, the top competition in their respective department. So as per usual, I'll be analyzing Jingliu's design and gameplay and give my thoughts on what she brings to the game's current meta. Star Rail is sparing no expense, giving us impossibly attractive characters to tempt into breaking our wallets in half, which might be the only reason many of you are going after her, and to that I say that's very justified. But I think Jingliu faces an interesting conundrum that might make her more difficult to evaluate on a surface level. She's the first Ice Element character widely available to us, which we are most certainly in need of. Not that the current Ice roster is bad or anything, it's just that it's sorely lacking in any form of offensive AoE pressure. Ice has a rather unique property that both helps and hurts the members who carry it. Naturally, the weakness break and accompanying status effect with the element is Frozen, immobilizing enemies for a few turn rotations while dealing ice damage periodically. When timed correctly, you can buy yourself a few extra turns by delaying critical enemy actions, but there's kind of an implicit condition with this interaction. When an enemy breaks out of Frozen, they skip their turn, but their next turn comes just a few actions later to signify being delayed from being frozen. However, what they don't tell you is that this actually means they get more turns per cycle even if for some of them they don't do anything, effectively reducing the duration of any status effects attached to them. On one hand, this makes any buffs they have expire faster, but it can also make debuffs expire faster too, making Ice Element a bit less desirable than Imaginary, which also delays enemy action without giving them more turns. This doesn't necessarily hinder Jingliu, but being an Ice Element user and having a freeze component, she will freeze enemies often, which can make dealing damage more stringent on timing than if she were any other element. It's not exactly clear whether or not this will impact her gameplay, but seeing as how she spreads out her damage over multiple turns instead of being a single burst attacker, this could pose a problem for her that other carry units don't have to deal with. Being a destruction unit, which is quickly turning into the strongest of the 3 damage paths, she excels in attacking a single target but can also inflict a fair bit of damage to mobs too, making her a strong general attacker. Her basic attack is nothing unique to her, just a token bit of ice damage. As for her skill, she has a single target variant and a blast variant, the latter of which we'll talk about in a bit. Transcendent Flash deals ice damage and gives her a stack of Syzygy while speeding up her next action via one of her traces. She can also gain a stack of Syzygy through her ultimate, which is a blast attack. Now, while the damage numbers are decently impressive to have at base, the ultimate comes with a rather exorbitant 140 energy cost, the highest in the game, and will definitely need to be considered when building her. The Syzygy stacks are more than just an ammo system, as they directly correlate to amplifying her damage. While she has 2 stacks, she enters the Spectral Transmigration state, speeding up her actions, giving her a staggering 50% crit rate, and transforming her skill into Moon on Glacial River, the aforementioned blast attack, for even more damage. So in some ways, her attack pattern behaves like Danhong, where she can upgrade her attack to deal AoE damage, although in this case, it's not based on SP and it's attached to her skill, not normal attack. Curiously, when using an attack during this state, she drains health from her entire team and boosts her attack based on the total HP consumed from everyone in this instance multiplied by 5.4 times at rank 10, or capping at 1.8 times the base attack. It should be noted that her empowered skill consumes a stack of Syzygy, which will end her buff state if she drops to 0 stacks, but she can hold up to 3. So the gist of her gameplay is to preserve that buff state for as long as you can, since not only does she get a big speed boost, but an impressive 50% crit, effectively meaning you can spec more of your relics into crit damage, kind of like how Yanqing gets a ton of crit, only Jingliu's condition is way more lenient. The other way you can get a Syzygy stack is through her technique, instantly freezing all enemies in the overworld that are caught in her zone, and when she enters combat, she regenerates 15 energy, has a 100% base chance of freezing enemy targets, and gains a stack. So with her technique and one cast of her skill, she can empower herself very quickly. And finally, with her ultimate, she goes up to 3. So your standard combo on her is to use her technique, enter her fight, use her skill, then ultimate to get to 3 stacks, then triple empower skill. You want to activate her buff state first before ulting so that your ult gets a big damage buff too, especially with one of her traces. Very straightforward playstyle. Essentially, disregarding elements for a moment, Jingliu is a slight downgrade to Danhong in terms of max DPS, but compensates for this by having an easier time reaching her ceiling if you want to think of it that way. But that doesn't mean she's going to be easy to use. Given her DPS potential, directly hinging on siphoning health from the rest of her party, there are 2 things you have to be aware of. 1. Your teammates better have sufficient max health to reach that 1.8 times 5.2 cap. I believe the total HP of your 3 other party members should be at least 11,000 or something like that. And 2, you need sustain, a lot of it. Every time Jingliu attacks while buffed, she drains 4% max HP from her team. This may not look like a lot at first glance, but you're already having to face tank enemy damage, most of which can leave your team in critical condition as it is, let alone the damage you're inflicting on yourself. Conveniently, Jingliu can kill her own team by doing this, but it's something to keep in mind, and unlike Blade who only damages himself, Jingliu damages her whole party, so you'll need to find ways for everyone to regenerate. But as I mentioned before, if you're taking on some of the game's harder content, characters already struggle to withstand heavy burst damage as it is. They can't afford to enter enemy phase already injured, that might just be a death sentence with them. Therein lies the issue. Jingliu will most likely need both the healer and tank. Solo sustaining her will be extremely tough depending on who you have. For someone like Blade, the only person you really have to worry about keeping alive is him. But for Jingliu, in long drawn out fights, you're gonna need someone who can top off everyone, and presently, the only one with consistent and fast enough regeneration for the entire party is Lo Cha, courtesy of the full party heal you get from his trace. Viola and Natasha can't sustain her on their own. Honestly, it depends on how comfortable you want her to be, but assuming you're playing more for comfort and not maximum efficiency, a tank and healer are both necessary. Tank supports like Japard and Fushuan can make sure your team doesn't get one-shotted by accident, which can happen more easily than you think. All that is to say, Jingliu is deceptively expensive to play optimally. It's not exactly obligatory to have units like Lo Cha, Fushuan, Japard and such, but they make playing her a lot more comfortable. It's not like Kafka who can have an entire team of 4 stars and herself. But then again, I feel like nowadays every team needs Lo Cha, so maybe I'm overestimating the cost of using her. In any case, there are a few more things I want to make note of. Jingliu will likely allow you to play with 2 damage dealers at once, which can make her very desirable for endgame content. The team I plan on going with for her is Blade, Silverwolf or Bronya, and Lo Cha or Fushuan depending on how burst heavy the content is. Blade and Jingliu can work well together for 2 reasons. 1. Draining Blade's HP with Jingliu's skill will cause the latter's ultimate to hurt that much more, and 2. Both of them are SP efficient, as Blade only needs to use 1 SP every 3 turns to charge his basic attack, while Jingliu only needs to use his skill once too, since her empowered skill uses up synergy stacks instead of HP. This allows both of them to be used in the same party without draining your resource pool. Blade also builds max HP, so even with this sucking the life out of him, he probably still has enough in reserve to face tank whatever attacks enemies decide to throw at him. And of course the higher HP means Jingliu can max out her own damage. Silverwolf is obviously a given. She can apply elemental weaknesses on demand along with a myriad of other debuffs. But remember, like I said with Frozen, unless they fixed it without us knowing, debuffs expire faster against Frozen enemies by nature of how the status effect works, which can be a problem. It doesn't diminish her value enough to warrant concern, but it can lead to consistency problems if you're not careful. This also applies to Pela too. Her massive defense reduction only lasts 2 turns, but with Jingliu's freeze, it's more like 1.5 turns, which may not be long enough for Jingliu to get off all her empowered skills. Bronya is just disgusting with anyone, and Jingliu is no exception. Now, one last thing I want to cover are her Eidolons. She's perfectly usable at base, but her Eidolons have very interesting functions that can vastly increase her DPS. Destruction units are the middle ground between Erudition and Hunt, with Erudition spreading its damage across all enemies, and Hunt concentrating all damage on a single target. Destruction hybridizes this by putting a lot of damage on the primary target with splash damage to adjacent enemies. Jingliu's E1, however, can make her a hybrid between Destruction and Hunt though. Whenever she uses her ultimate or empowered skill, she gains bonus crit damage, and if only one enemy is struck by either attack as opposed to 2 or 3, the damage dealt against the isolated target will be increased by 100% of her attack as well, which is a non-negligible increase in damage, as this can apply to every single use of her ultimate and empowered skill. E2 makes the next cast of her empowered skill deal 80% bonus damage after using her ultimate, a significant booster of front-loaded damage, and one reason you want to build an energy regen rope on her if you do manage to get 3 copies of her. And finally, E6, exorbitant as it will be to get, further amplifies her crit damage while allowing her to hold up to 4 stacks of synergy at a time for greater sustained burst damage. As per usual, Eidolons are only for people who have more money than they know what to do with, but for the 2 or 3 of you watching with ambitions to deck out Jingliu, her Eidolons do not fail to impress. Overall, as stated earlier in the video, the best way I can TLDR Jingliu is that she's an easier Super Dan Heng with a slightly lower damage ceiling. Her playstyle is really interesting when you factor in the party HP drain, but that comes with the added caveat of team building being more demanding on her than other carry units. However, this is also made up by the fact that she pairs very nicely with other 5-star characters like Blade, Fushuan, Silverwolf, Bronya, and Lo Cha, meaning if you do have those other units, you can really tap into her full potential. Blade and Jingliu can both operate at full efficiency without stepping on each other's toes. Lo Cha's on-hit party-wide regen can refund the HP cost needed for Jingliu's buff state. Fushuan, along with having a ton of max health, can shield your team from burst damage while empowering Jingliu's attack even further. Lastly, Bronya is just broken in general. She can accelerate and buff Jingliu to become a burst attacker, at which point the turn issue with freeze doesn't matter, and Silverwolf can increase her damage that much more. That's not to say she can't synergize with 4 stars, but I do feel like out of all the 5-star damage dealers we have so far, Jingliu has a more implicit reliance on other 5 stars, which is why I consider her deceptively expensive. So with all that said and done, is she worth pulling for? Yes, but she is very team demanding, and those teammates can also be quite expensive. So if you're short on cash, I think there are more lax 5 stars to use. But obviously no matter what I say, everyone's gonna pull for her because waifu over meta, am I right? Anyways, let me know your thoughts on Jingliu in the comments down below, whether you plan to get her or not. Aside from that, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Honkai Star Rail character discussions if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.